Good morning, everybody. Arturo here, talking to you from Japan. Guys, we're going to jump right into something, and I'm going to call it the Ramen Effect here on episode 2 of GaijinSake. Guys, the Ramen Effect. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, no matter what you feel, if you say one simple negative thing about anything in Japan, don't be surprised. Again, don't be surprised when people will answer you, especially Japanese, and say, oh, you hate Japan. Guys, for years, I've had this concept of what I call the ramen effect. Now, what's the ramen effect? The ramen effect is when you say anything negative, almost like Japanese culture is programmed to go against anything that anyone says who's not Japanese in a bad way. And let me break it down for you, because this is like any culture, but here it's so in your face that you don't even realize it's happening. And I've seen a lot of foreigners feel embarrassed by it, but it's really nothing to be embarrassed by. It's just kind of a funny cultural quirk, right? So let me explain what the ramen effect is. The ramen effect is, for example, let me put it in context. You're eating ramen. You're here in Japan. You're just relaxing, chilling, doing your thing. And all of a sudden, you say, oh, this ramen isn't so good. And your Japanese compatriot, your friend, whatever you want to say, will in their head, all of a sudden go, oh, this foreigner this Gaijin doesn't like Japan. It's almost like a defensive mechanism. And there's a lot of different points that go into it. One point can be, a lot of times people will discuss here about how Japanese might have a inferiority complex to foreigners, especially because they still have the stigma of losing the war. Personally, I don't think most Japanese people are actually that deep thinking about how things happen. It's just like anywhere, but the way Japanese education works and the lack of critical thinking, most Japanese people don't tend to react like, oh, let me think about this. They just react. And it's happened to me, to friends, so many people, where it's like, you say, oh, this ramen isn't so good. And they assume you hate all of Japan. But you actually don't hate Japan. This one particular ramen is something that you just don't like. It's not as good as the one you had, or the 1,000 ramens that you had that are fantastic. Japanese people will react that only at this moment they think you hate Japan. And it has nothing to do with Japan. You just didn't like the ramen. I know it sounds insane. Imagine if we were in the States and I said, if someone said, oh, this hamburger isn't as good. This hamburger isn't so good. And you're like, oh, you hate America. Oh, you hate American culture. Why are you here? If you don't like it, leave. It's funny that a lot of people will actually think that way here. And I've run into it so many times. And it takes time for Japanese to get over that, because it's almost like I said, it's a defensive mechanism. Maybe it's because they feel somewhat of an inferiority complex. And I think the inferiority complex is something I really, really want to get into, because I've realized over the last 25 years that let's say that the base of the inferiority complex goes back to losing World War II. Okay, fine. World War II ended in 1945. Jesus, that's like we're 225. So it's been so long that I don't think it still adds to it, maybe to the older generation. But I think the younger generation wouldn't even be able to tell you when World War II happened or what happened, except they would say, oh, Nihon maketa, like Japan lost. So this inferiority complex, it's almost like when I was in New York in 2023, I was visiting a really good friend, and we were driving in the Uber. We were in the Uber, and I looked up, and and it'd been a while since I've been in the States or anywhere like with giant billboards or whatnot in the States, and I kept seeing like lingerie pictures of overweight women, obese women on the billboards. And I was actually, because I've never seen that. I'd actually never lived that because I've been in Japan. We don't have anything like that. So I was kind of shocked. And then, like if you say anything about any woman in the States now that's even a little bit overweight or plus size or anything, whatever they want to call it, all of a sudden you hate all women. You hate everything. In Japan, it's very similar. If you say anything about anything Japanese, then people will be like, oh, you hate Japan. But again, like I said, this inferiority complex that they have is also combined with the superiority complex. Now, let me finish about the inferiority complex first. I honestly think that the inferiority complex that a lot of Japanese have nowadays is a result of two products. One, the education system that really hasn't, like if you ask Japanese people, especially moms, dads, everyone will say the exact same thing. The problem with Japanese public education is that it hasn't really changed since World War II. Guys, it hasn't really changed that much since after the war. So it still has a lot of things. For example, in things that my kids had said to me that I found really interesting, not just my kids, my actual kids, but kids I've raised over 25 years here in Japan. Things like, oh, there are some medicines that don't work on Japanese or only affect Japanese differently. Like there's some kind of, they're not even like a species. They're like not a race, it's a species, right? And this is actually things that they say in Japanese. And as we go through a lot of this, GaijinSake, I'm going to have so much like humor for you guys. Guys, everything I say, I find humorous because if I didn't, it would drive me crazy. But sometimes I'm going to say direct translation, and this is exactly how it's said in Japanese. But when you say it in English with all our cultural background, and I'm not judging from our cultural background, I'm just like always shooting from the hip, telling you guys like what I see here and how it works here and insights, right? Guys, it's crazy. Like if I say sometimes one of the most simple things that you get here about this inferiority complex is one, maybe because of the war, the lack of educational development since then. And the second thing I think, which plays even a bigger part nowadays, is social media and marketing. Everything in Japan is geared towards, I don't know how to say it. It's like Western is always better. Like Western is always more beautiful. Western is always like Western models on TV. Yeah, they have Japanese models, but that's also a very heavy influence of like the Japanese models will be very subservient. They'll be very soft, very cutesy. And I'll get into the concept of cute in Japan in another podcast because that's another whole story. But whenever it's a foreign woman, she's shown as more beautiful. Like foreign women are more kire, like clean, beautiful, if they're like models, right? But if they're Japanese, they're kawaii, which is cute. So this marketing, everywhere you go, you can see where like foreign people, foreign women are put into more of a erai, like I gotta think in my brain right now, translating sometimes. Erai is more like more elite. I think that's the best word for it. And this inferiority complex really plays a lot into dealing with Japanese culture here. And this takes us back to the whole like ramen syndrome or the ramen situation. If you say anything about Japanese, anything, Japanese will assume you hate it. And I think a lot of times, a lot of Japanese people who are involved with international people or non-Japanese people here in Japan, for example, I'll be honest with you, like a situation with like my wife, my students, my friends, my family, everybody here, over the last 25 years, people will be like, oh, why are you so negative about Japan? And it's because there are times where I feel everyone goes through a process of where the rosy glasses come off when you're here in Japan and you realize that there's the good and the bad. There's a lot of bad things that give you stress here as much as it gives Japanese people stress. So when you say something like, oh, I don't like this, or even if you were at a temple and you told your Japanese guide or whatever, oh, this temple isn't as nice as the other one, they will take it as you hate Japan. And people might say, oh, that's not true. People are different. It's that. You know, most of the stuff here is pretty much similar. And that's what makes it so easy to live and to survive here. Because once you figure out the simple, basic things, you really understand how the culture works and you can really insulate yourself. I don't want to say isolate, insulate yourself from all the negativity. And when I say negativity, I want to say negativity that affects everyone, especially Japanese people here. So when we're talking about like this inferiority complex, it's kind of weird because it's not offset, but compounded with stress of a superiority complex. For example, Japanese will always act different here in Japan than outside of Japan. Outside of Japan, people think, oh, Japanese are so polite. Japanese are so kind and oh, so organized, so clean. Guys, that's how they act outside. But inside Japan, it's completely different. And again, it's another concept or another idea for a podcast. But Japanese, a lot of people are now saying, I see a lot of social media where people are saying Japanese aren't actually polite. They're just socially functional, which means that they know how to function in society because of the pressure of Japanese society. And I definitely will be talking about that in another podcast. But today we're talking about the ramen syndrome, right? So this concept that Japanese understand is that Japan is for the Japanese, and they'll, on several occasions in situations, I've seen where it's like, Nihonjin dakara, Nihonjin katsune. Like it's Japan, so Japanese always win. The law, the social society, anyone. The same thing happened to me when I was in Korea years ago. We were told like don't get into any situation, like don't get into any fights in the streets. Even if you see two Koreans fighting, don't get involved because then the Koreans will turn against you. That was something that we were told when I was there in 96 and 97. And Japan is the same thing. I don't know about the fighting thing now because I don't get involved in that stuff. But if there's an argument or anything, if there's a car crash, it's kind of like more your fault because if you weren't in Japan, it wouldn't have happened. I know it sounds really weird, but that's part of Japanese society and something that if you're going to be here long term, you got to understand and learn how to navigate. You don't have to hate it. You just have to understand how it works. So a lot of times when I want to give a comment, I'll only say it to somebody who's very close and knows that I'm not coming from a place of hate. I'm just coming from a place of social commentary, of criticism, of analysis, of debate, but not about, like, oh, just because this ramen today isn't so good, I hate Japan. Guys, like I said, I'm trying to keep these to snippets of podcasts. I'm having a really good time. I think 10 to 15 minutes makes it really easy for you guys to enjoy on your way to work. And guys, I'll see you next episode of GaijinSake. Thanks, guys. If you're checking this out on YouTube, remember to subscribe, like, share, and hit the notification bell. If you want to know what I'm doing more, check out my Mastery Vibes Patreon page. Links in the comment. And you get to see everything I do here in Japan. Guys, many new videos, travel videos. I'm going to be starting to record 4K travel videos of Japan, and those will be up as soon as I can. As always, arigatou gozaimashita. Mata yoroshiku onegai shimasu.